Affect Autism in its 10th year of providing free supportive content for your DIR journey.
All of Affect Autism's podcasts are produced and edited by Daria Brown. Please note that the views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved, do not constitute educational or medical advice, and do not necessarily reflect the views of Affect Autism, Daria Brown, nor ICDL and associated parties. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with their individual circumstances for specific support.
Parent Perspectives, a podcast from Affect Autism. Welcome, Floortimers, to this edition of Parent Perspectives. This episode's guest is Juana Zayek, a full-time parent, a passionate advocate, and a deep thinker, navigating life through the lens of a late ADHD diagnosis. Juana lives in Minnesota with her neurodivergent family, 2 autistic ADHD children, now 12 and 19, and her autistic ADHD, or as they say, ADHD, husband. Her journey into full-time caregiving began when her younger son's experience of school trauma made traditional education no longer viable. Isn't that a sad story that so many families with neurodivergent kids face? A turning point that reshaped her family's path and purpose. And she is here to share her glorious experience, I don't know if glorious is the right word, at the DIR Institute in New Jersey recently at a week-long intensive with her husband and one of her children. So welcome so much, Juana. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Daria. It's so great to be here.
I am thrilled that you agreed to be on the podcast, and I'm assuming that the reason you did is because your experience was so powerful and you wanted to share that with other families, because the last podcast, Parent Perspectives podcast that talked about the intensives, had the same thing where the parents just felt so strongly about that experience and it really changed how they interacted with their child, and they noticed big changes once they got home. And you had mentioned the same thing happened with your family. So I'm so eager to dive in. So first of all, tell us, how did you learn about Floortime? What made you interested in Floortime? Or even if you want to go back further about your children's diagnoses or whatever you are comfortable sharing.
Yep. So our 12-year-old was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3.5. And we started the interventions that were recommended by the then developmental pediatrician, and it was going the behavioral route. We did that for a little bit of time, and we, as a family, did not really agree with it. Fundamentally, don't agree with the behavioral approach. So then we looked into developmental approaches. We did find a clinic. However, the turnover rate of the therapist there was very, very high. And even though they were doing some form of Floortime, it was short-lived. So our experience with Floortime was short-lived at the time. And that was about probably like 7 years ago. So then move forward, me attending an autism conference for Minnesota last year in April. And that's where one of the presenters is actually part of a clinic here in Minnesota, rural Minnesota. And she is, all 3 of them were actually DIR certified people. And she mentioned affect autism. I even have the note, actually in one of my notebooks here, a note that she left because I had questions for her and she didn't have the time to answer all my questions. So on that little note, she said, check this websites out. And one of them was affect autism. And I'm like, and I forgot about that for a little bit. And then I stumbled into it when we were in the middle of like really our son's transition to middle school was very traumatic for all of us, him included, but for the entire family. So then I tried to really squeeze my brains, like, what can I do? Where should I go to? And I found that note and I went on your website and I started listening to your podcast and I started reading about it. And then I went on the ICDL website. I signed up for the conference in October. And from there on, that's really what started this whole journey. And we really immersed ourselves in it because we really had no other options. And this seemed to be the one that would give us as parents the most agency in becoming the best parents we can be for our son and be involved in the whole process, given that our son has been at home receiving homebound services since October till currently he's doing that right now. So the whole school year was at home. So yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. And at some point, then in between the conference and now, you started attending ICDL's parent support meetings that I
Yep,
facilitate. And
exactly.
you heard other parents talking about the intensives, and it piqued your curiosity, and you
Yeah.
actually went.
Yeah, and I watched the podcast that you had, the interviews with other parents. I listened to those and then I looked on the ICDL website and I read more about the intensives there. I'm like, this is the perfect fit. And we were so looking forward to it. And Minnesota has a very has very generous forms of funding for kids with autistic kids, and one of them is a consumer directed support waiver funds, which allows a person to live in the house and receive services that way. And for our child, that meant that part of that funding could cover parent coaching. And the intensives are basically that, categorized as parent coaching. So we got to go to New Jersey. We got to meet Becky and Katie, and it was the most incredible experience ever. And I think it's Stuart Shanken that said that when you see a child differently, you see a different child. That's exactly what happened during the intensives. You know, it was like those moments of like, oh my God, this is my child, and yet I see him in a different light. And with Katie and Becky's coaching, we really got to build that relationship that really it was there, but it was not quite there. So it was very gently guiding us into reconnecting with our child in ways that we haven't done it before, and understanding how we come into the relationship, into this dyad, how I come into the relationship with my son, and how I can be more important than technology, or I can be more important than a TV show, but it's basically coaching us through really being the best parents we can be for our son, but also instilling in us some sort of like this really confidence and the sense of agency. And it was the first time when I felt like I was on equal footing with the therapist, because my role is as important as the therapist's role. And this, I really believe that DIR Floortime is the only intervention that does that, is the only way where I feel like I am as important as the therapist, where before there has always been this power dynamic between, like, I would go to the therapist like the know-it-all person, right? Well, now I'm an expert in my child and I can bring that to the table. And I think the biggest revelation that I had was how I show up in the conversation, like how I show up in the interaction with my child, and looking at the FEDCs that we talk about, right, in a DIR floor time, and how I'm aware of my own regulation or dysregulation, what are my emotional stages in the moments that we connect, and how I need to be there. Like, connection becomes the most important part of this in our entire world, and it really shaped our family dynamic and so on so many levels.
Okay, well, we're going to dive into all of those point by point here. So the first thing I'll say is um, the intensives. If people are listening to this and they're not aware of what we're talking about, I will link in the blog post for today's episode to the podcast about the intensives at the DIR Institute in New Jersey. You go and you arrive like on the weekend. You go from Monday to Friday from like 9 to 3 ish, something like that, with an hour for lunch
Yeah.
break, and you're coached. And she mentioned Becky and Katie. That's Becky Gottlieb, who is an educator. She's part of ICDL's staff. She's running the intensives at the Institute. She's phenomenal. I went with my son last August for an intensive as well, and Becky was one of the coaches. My other coach was occupational therapist Gretchen Kamke. Juana's other coach was speech language therapist Katie Shepard, who I will link back to a podcast I did with her. But in the intensives, they are not doing anything except floor time coaching. So although Katie is a speech language pathologist, although Gretchen is an occupational therapist, at our intensives, yours and mine, they were not doing speech language
No.
pathology or occupational therapy. They're floor time coaching. And so it's really about helping raise the parents' self efficacy, as Colette Ryan did her dissertation on, that I'll link back to that podcast as well, where, you know, you said a bunch of things that I almost want to reframe, because you said, now I'm the expert on my child. Now, as if you weren't before. And that's one of the things the floor time
Yeah.
coaches want to do, is remind parents that you know your child best. You are the one that can make the most difference in their lives. And I think that as parents, we do kind of feel lost when our children behave differently than we know how to interact with. And we do look to people like, please help me. And we put them in that power position, and
Mhm.
they're trained to do this and that and show parents what to do. And floor time is really about taking away the power dynamic and just focusing on that connection and helping you reformulate how you connect with your child. So I love how you said all of that. And I would love to hear more about one of the things that you, well, there's two things that you talked about that I want to talk about, and I'll let you decide how to convey that and share that. But one thing was that that connection of realizing that your child understood more than you thought, and then your experience with limit setting. So when your child protests and you want to set limits, but then you're scared to set limits because they're going to have a meltdown, and that whole process, I understand, is something that you guys focused on during the week. So tell
We
us
did.
about, yeah, tell us about how you learned that, oh, my child's understanding a lot more. And first of all, is your child non-speaking? Describe a little bit more, without giving away too much, about your child's profile.
Yeah. So before I answer your question, I just want to add here the fact that the coaching that happens is guided and is done in a way that is very reflective of the DIR floor time of philosophy in general. Is that building rapport? There's no judgment, no. It's literally pure guidance, and it's done with love and compassion and understanding. And it's just beautiful to feel and experience. So I would encourage, I think it's the best thing that any parent could do for themselves and their child. Now, to answer your question about my son's profile, so in terms of language, he's a Gestalt language learner. And for those of you who don't know, I would encourage you to post the link to your the podcast that you did on Gestalt language learning and DIR floor time. So he's a Gestalt language learner, and he functions within the stages of 1 to 3 within Gestalt language. Granted, there are like about 6 of them. So we're working towards stage 4 and doing the self-generated language. So limited speaking, but still has vocabulary, is not really using an AAC device, is mostly self-generated language that is, but many times as gestalt, like phrases and sentences that he would memorize from shows, and that he would use those in interactions. Similar to DIR floor time, we have to play the role of detectives, like figuring out, what does this gestalt mean? Just like with behaviors, like, what does this behavior tell? Or what does this reaction tell us about what he's wanting? Or why? Why is he doing this? Why is he reacting in this way? Why is he leaving and not staying with me? Like, why, right? So so he's a Gestalt language learner. And in terms of setting boundaries, I think the most important part that actually Dr. Giltippy mentioned, who visited with us during the intensives, where what he said is that the most important thing is to get our son to realize that we are human beings with our own emotions and our own bodies, which can be hurt if they are, if you hit someone, they get hurt, right? But the idea behind it is to really convey that message so that we understand, he understands, and we're all in understanding that we are individual human beings with our own emotions and our own bodies, and we can get hurt. And that is not, it's not okay. So setting that boundary to realize, hey, I am my own person, I have my own feelings, I have my own body, and you are too. So that was the most important part, because when the big emotions and feelings happen, and the go-to is something that is probably not reachable within the moment, or something that is very, very hard to get, or almost impossible to get, like an object, or an experience, or a person. And then the go-to would be, starting to cry, and then being either self-injurious behavior, or injuring people, or just doing things to the environment. Prior to the intensives, that those episodes were quite frequent. They have decreased in frequency ever since we kind of started coming home, being at home more, and having the feeling of safety, and not the flight or flight all the time. But they're still there. And prior to the intensives, the length was quite significant. And now we're looking at shorter periods of time. And the most impactful part in that is what I also learned in the intensives, is that the power of connection. Going in, I thought I should give my son space to feel his feelings and emotions, and not be part of that process. And what I learned with Becky and Katie's guidance is that I should be right there with him. And that means co-regulating. That means being aware of my own emotions. So that's where the self-awareness piece comes in, right? Which is so crucial, so critical. Being aware of my own emotions, where I'm at in this, and then trying to co-regulate, keeping at the forefront the idea of safety in the first place, right? And then going in and trying to really approach it with compassion, and with kindness, and with love. And just, we say a lot, like I would tell him many times now, when that happens, like, I am right here, I love you very, very much, we are kind, we love each other very much, and I'm sorry you feel this way. So it's just, but trying also to keep language at a minimum, right? So you say all of those things, but you don't say it all at once. So just giving it space, and just slowing down. The slowing down part was a really, really big one. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. And it's been a shift for all of us in the family, because it starts, and in schools they still have that. They still have those quiet rooms where they would send kids who in were dysregulated. They would send them, close the door, and let them feel their feelings, which is like so counterintuitive to where all of this happens. Like, I am heightened. I need to connect with someone because I'm so overwhelmed with emotions. And I was doing that. I was doing exactly what I thought that was the right thing to do, because the school was doing it too. So it was a complete shift. So that was probably the biggest aha moment.
Yeah, it's really amazing, because I think that it is overwhelming for a lot of us to witness that intense emotional outburst. It
Yes,
makes us uncomfortable, because most of us growing up were not allowed to have those kinds of emotional outbursts,
right.
because our parents would say, like, stop crying or whatever. And
Yep,
so we have to get used to that as well. But I just wanted to make a disclaimer here, because, and I think, this is just for the listener. So you said, Dr. Tibby's message was, child has to understand that we're all individuals, and it can hurt people. And I know that Dr. Tibby knows this, and I know that you knew this, but just for the listener's benefit, I just want to say, sometimes the child does know that, but they're unable to control their
that's
outbursts.
true.
So they will
Yeah,
know that they're hurting their parent, but they don't want to hurt their parent, and they don't intend to. And that's where the next part that you brought in is so important, because by being there with their emotional reaction, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said your child's outbursts were up to 2 hours long and reduced to like 2 minutes long. And of course, there may
Yep.
be variation in that, but is that really
Yes.
true?
Yeah.
I mean,
That is, yes,
that's
yes,
incredible.
yes. A while
That
back, like those long hours would happen. And now it's going down. And we even had for the past 3 days, we've been managing one instance in particular, and every time the duration is smaller and smaller and smaller. And probably this 3 days was not like 2 minutes long, but it was a little bit, just probably 5 to 10. But it was still a lot less than what would have been before. And if you see him an hour after, it's like nothing happened. And that was not the case before, to where this would become a whole day type of affair, adventure into the realm of feeling feelings. So it's not that he's not feeling them the same way that he did before. It's just that the self-regulation and building that connection and learning to really understand that this is not possible right now. We cannot do this right now. I know you want it, and I know you probably have great memories of this place, but we can't go there right now. And it's okay to not go there right now, because we can do some other things. So, and that this is where the whole idea of like that he understands more than I actually thought he does understand comes from, because I would limit my interactions with him thinking that, well, it's Gestalt language, so I should probably not say more. But in the same time, like right now, we have an evening routine to where we would just recap the day. And I would start talking about, okay, what happened today? Let's just see who did we meet? What did we do? What was the fun thing that we do? And I would just start saying, well, we met with the homebound teacher, and then we had this friend come over, and I would pause, and then he would just look at me and say, yes, mama, which was not the case before. Like, this is incredible. And the other really awesome thing is that we do it in the car. So we would drive down the highway, and I would get started with, oh, that's a white truck. And then it would just become this game to where he would say, oh, that's a black truck. And I would say, and they would say, yes, mama. Like, just it's just adorable. It's just something that has not happened before. And now he's actually drawing me attention to the motorcycles that he sees on the road, which is, again, it's something that hasn't happened before. And I feel like the really the intensives gave me the opportunity to become and challenge me to become more emotionally available. And I think the beauty and the challenge of the DIR floor time, and that's where self-efficacy comes from parents. It requires emotional availability on the parent part, which is something
does.
that other interventions don't at all. But this one in particular, you as a parent, you have to be emotionally available, and you know, just be in your vulnerability and just grow with the child. So that's, I feel like I've been growing with my child a lot emotionally. And from an interoception point of view, oh my goodness, like I'm aware of all my body parts and all the feelings, and yes, and I'm pretty sure he's too. So yeah.
I want to say for parents that might be listening and going, ugh, I don't know, I can't be emotionally available. I just want to say, I want to reiterate what Juana said at the beginning, which is there is no judgment. Becky and whichever therapist you end up being with as the secondary therapist there are so non judgmental and really trying to meet you where you're at and make you feel so comfortable in just being honest with what you feel. If you say, I can't do this, it drives me crazy when my child does this, I don't even want to look at him or her or whatever, they're there with you in that and really helping bridge that issue that might be problematic in helping that connection and really helping find a path to that connection. And you just gave great example of floor time in the car. One of my older podcasts that I did floor time in the car, and I did floor time in the car part 2, which I'm going to link back to in the episode notes on the blog post for today. And isn't it just a wonderful feeling when you're sharing that experience together? And, my son's latest thing is Cybertruck. I want one, Mama. I want one. No, we're not getting a Cybertruck. I want one. I want one. And he's not saying it so much, I want one, like screaming and crying. He's saying it with exuberance. My son is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
filled with enthusiasm and he's so excited. And then he says, how much is it, Mama? How much is it? It's probably $150,000 or more. I want one. No, we're not getting one. So by the time this airs, his birthday will have passed. I got a toy Cybertruck. So I'm very excited
That's
to
awesome.
see how he likes it. And then I actually got a second one because I saw a second one available. So the first one is a remote control. And then the other one is more a toy that has like also this like Cybertruck bike on the back of it that you can take off. And so they're different colors. So he also talks about different colors and stuff. And we see them every other day or so, and it's just such a fun experience, like Cybertruck, that shared experience that you have,
Yeah.
that is yours alone, because
Yeah.
he's in the car with somebody else. He's remembering like, oh, mom and I do this, and it's your special thing that you have, and just building all these moments of connection throughout the day, and these incidences like we're checking out motorcycles or checking out this builds up the trust in the relationship more and more, so
Right.
that when he is having those feelings of overwhelm, that trust is there. And now you are there present, saying,
Right.
I'm here with you while you're experiencing it. And just giving him that sense of, I'm going to be okay. And I don't need to lash out. Not that it's a conscious choice to lash out or not, but you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not reaching the boiling point. It's just simmering, simmering. Whew. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's amazing. It's
Exactly.
amazing.
It is. It is. And with also to parents who are like a little bit overwhelmed by the whole idea of like being emotionally available. It is a journey. It is definitely a journey of self-discovery. It's a journey of learning, but also it's a journey that has a lot of support. So I find your website incredibly amazing, and with a ton of resources. The Monday group is also fabulous. The coaches that we've had at the intensives are there with us. So we get 3 sessions of coaching before, 3 sessions of coaching after. We decided to put them all at the end, the back end instead of the front end, because they already had some background in knowing about DIR. And that was fantastic. That was great. So I met with Katie 2 days ago, and we're going to meet again on Monday. So talking through this episodes, right? Of like, what do I do when? And knowing that I have someone to support me in that is very, very important to know. So we built a whole support system around our child and our family. And that support system is basically, we had to do it because we were no longer in the schools. I mean, like in the actual school, official school setting. So then we have the homebound teacher, we have the occupational therapist who comes in home, we have the DIR floor timers who are there to support, and that is huge. So I think this journey, you're not doing it alone at all. It takes a village, really. It takes a village, and it takes a metro area sometimes. But you know what? You do it, and it's beautiful. So,
And I'm going to take that opportunity to plug some of our supports, because there may be families listening that say, "Oh, that's nice for you. You have funding and you can afford this." And I feel the same. I will plug my new book. I just wrote a book called We Chose Play:
my,
Raising an
oh my
Autistic
God, I
Child.
have to tell you.
Oh,
Oh gosh, I started reading it. It's
oh,
fantastic.
oh my goodness.
Oh my God, it's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank
Yes.
you. That's like
Sorry.
the first feedback I've gotten, except for my
Yes.
brother read chapter 1, and that was so. You're the second feedback I've received. Thank you so much. But it's called Raising an Autistic Child to Thrive and Feel Understood. And in that book, my worry is that parents are going to say, "Oh, easy for her. She does podcasts. She has access to all these DIR experts. She had financial support to provide all these services to her son." And what I say in the book is, Yes, that's true. I don't take that for granted at all. But it is why I put so much on my website. So if families don't have access to that, it is arduous and time consuming to read through stuff. But I have heard from a lot of parents that just listening to podcasts now and then, you pick up tips that can help you apply these principles at home, even if you don't have all of that support. But ICDL does have the DIR Parent Network. It is only $10 a month or $100 for the year, which makes it $8 a month. And if families really can't even afford that, always email me or ICDL and we can see if there's something we can do if you really want to be involved. And those parent support meetings are so powerful because we really share our experiences with each other. And it takes away that sense of isolation that we sometimes feel as parents when we want so badly to not see our children suffer with challenges that they go through, and we want to help them, but we also want them to develop and figure out their own capacities for self-regulation and problem solving. And we want to do too much for them sometimes, and other times we're not doing enough. And so just balancing all of this with the supports that are out there for floor time and this approach that we believe in, providing relationship-based, child-led, play-based, developmental approach that's neurodiversity affirming and relationship driven is so essential to your values, then hopefully these resources will be helpful to others too, even if you can't afford to go to the intensive.
Yeah, and what I would add to that, so again, congratulations on the book. Is absolutely fantastic. It's just so good. Highly recommend your book. And then I would also recommend, I went into the intensives having completed DIR 101, which is the foundational class for DIR, like knowledge wise. And I was also started to auditing DIR 201. So I had some knowledge, which is the reason why we moved the coaching sessions to the back end instead of the front end. But I highly also recommend parents who decide to do the intensives to really do the DIR 101, take the DIR 101 class, because it is you have so much more understanding of the whole process, the whole philosophy behind it. And it's at the opposite end of all behavioral approaches. So because going in, I had that in the back of my mind, and it was just explains the developmental approach in such a gentle, nicer, beautiful way. And you see why it's important to someone like me. So then I would recommend that class to be taken before, and yeah. And then all the podcasts. And what you have on Affect Autism website is a very nice way. Like you have categories to where people can go in and just plug in something they're looking for or a keyword or by categories, and it basically takes you through all of them. I was even checking out the meltdowns one.
So that's the start here menu at affectautism.com is what she's referring to. Yeah. And the DIR 101 course, An Introduction to DIR and DIR Floor Time, parents in the Parent Network get 25% off that course as well, which is a good incentive.
Yes, there you go. Mm-hmm.
And 25% off all short courses and the ICDL conference that's coming up in October, which is always a wonderful way to connect with both practitioners and parents and ask your questions to DIR practitioners and at all of the different sessions that are held that are on so many different topics. So it really is.
And they're all virtual.
Yes.
It's all virtual. Yeah. About 10 days of it.
Accessible to people all over the world. And it really, it's important to have community when you choose a DIR approach, because like you said, it is not the norm in general services and in schools and in all of this. So when you find those pockets of people that understand what you're going through, it's wonderful. So thank you so much, Juana, for sharing your experience. I appreciate it. I hope the listeners appreciate it, and check out the blog post at affectautism.com under the latest parent perspectives to find links to some of the things we talked about. And thanks again. Good luck with everything.
Thanks so much, Daria. Thank you. See you at the next support meeting. Parent support.
Monday. My new book is now available for purchase at your preferred online bookseller, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and others. We chose play, raising an autistic child to thrive and feel understood. Learn more at affectautism.com/we chose play, all one word.